Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and today, let's see, we are episode 68, March 12th, 2014. You can see all my episodes on walkinpark.com, my vid blog. Okay, so this is a really snowy day we've got here today. We actually have a winter storm right on us, a slush storm, which I guess is going to end up into ice and snow. So, so I guess the theme actually of today's show is going to be frozen lakes and waterfalls all over, but particularly in the Finger Lakes. But we'll take a look here. First, we're going to go to boom. They're up in space in a NASA satellite, and this is looking at what? Well, those are the Great Lakes. If you look at the extreme lower right, you can see the dark area. That's actually Lake Ontario with some cotton in it, which is actually on the right-hand side. That's ice. That is icing on Lake Ontario. Lake Ontario has gotten more ice on it than is usual. Actually, more than this. The date of this was earlier in the month, maybe last week, I guess. And it's iced over even more. And you look just below Lake Ontario on the extreme lower right, you can see a couple of dark scratches. Like those are the Finger Lakes from space. Actually, Seneca Lake and Cayuga Lake. Those are the only Finger Lakes that are not frozen over. And then you can see the rest of the Great Lakes there. You can probably make out to the lower left below, not lower left, but left, lower center, just below and to the left of Lake Ontario is frozen over Lake Erie. And then above Lake Erie is frozen over Lake Huron. And just to the left of that is mostly frozen over Lake Michigan. And then above that, incredibly, is up in the upper left is Lake Superior, the largest lake in North America. And it's, so, I don't know, 1,200 feet deep or so, and it is frozen over. It's pretty amazing that Lake Superior is frozen over, and Cayuga Lake is not, for the most part. So let's zoom in a little bit on another NASA satellite picture here. Same sequence. And there we can see the Finger Lakes. You can see up above on the top of the picture, again, is that area of ice on Lake Ontario. We're going to take a look at some of that ice in a couple of minutes here. But there you go, Seneca Lake on the left, and then Cayuga Lake on the right is frozen. Now notice that Cayuga Lake isn't as long as it normally looks because the northern 10 miles or so are frozen over. The last 10 miles or so of Cayuga Lake on the north end is 10 feet deep and less, and the water is able to cool off and freeze. And also the southern end of the lake is frozen over some, as it usually does, because it's also shallow for a little ways. We'll take a look at that too. So why is it that Lake Superior will freeze over, but not Cayuga and Seneca Lake, except very rarely? Excuse me. People ask that question. Now you can look to the east and west, or the right and left of Seneca and Cayuga Lake, by the way, and you might be able to make out the outlines of, to the left of Seneca Lake, Cayuga Lake, Canandaigua Lake, and some of the smaller Finger Lakes to the west of that, Canadice, Hemlock, and Canisius Lake. And then to the right of Cayuga Lake is Owasco, Skaneateles, and Otisco Lake. Also notice that Oneida Lake in the upper right, that white area, is it's a shallow lake, and it is frozen over. So all of those lakes are frozen, but not the big longest lakes of the Finger Lakes. And yet Lake Superior, which is probably twice as deep or more than Seneca Lake, and maybe 3 times as deep as Cayuga Lake, is frozen over. And of course, the surface area is amazing. So, my explanation of this, I think it's true, is that Seneca Lake and Cayuga Lake are very deep for their size. Seneca Lake's about 650 feet deep. Cayuga's about 435 feet deep. And so the surface area cools off, the surface water, but the water below is a little bit warmer, and the winds keep recirculating the water all winter long without a lot of exposure to the much colder air. So I think that's one of the reasons it keeps open. Now, the lakes do freeze over from time to time. It's up until, well, historically about every 15 years from the 1800s on, that where records have been kept, the Seneca Lake and Cayuga Lake actually do freeze end to end for a period during the winter, but it hasn't happened since 1979, and it may not have been a complete ice cover in that year, and that's probably due to our generally warming climate. So, but I thought it might happen this winter with the extreme cold and long spells, but we've had a number of thaws punctuate the cold weather, and so the ice cover hasn't gotten as far as it might have. So, yeah, so and that's pretty much it, I guess. I think the explanation that at least I would give, and someone who's looked at these lakes and studied them and tried to learn about them as much as I can over the last 30 or 40 years. So, well, let's go back up to Lake Ontario. Here we were looking at Lake Ontario up there. Look at all the ice on there. So let's go up to Chimney Bluff State Park. Now, if you look directly north of Cayuga and Seneca Lakes up on the shore up there, in that area is Sodus Bay, and just to the right of Sodus Bay is Chimney Bluff State Park, which is this eroded drumlin geologically. It's this big earthen mound that was left by the glaciers, but is eroded by wave action from the lake. And so it leaves all these spires in kind of a badland type aspect. But look at all the ice in Lake Ontario off the bluff there, and you can see a couple of people right in the center of the picture for a sense of scale. And this picture was taken from the top of the bluff. Now, I didn't take these. These were taken by a photographer friend of mine, Nigel Peter Benson Kent, and he's quite a photographer, and you might want to look him up on the internet and find his website and so forth. He has a Facebook page, Nigel Peter Benson Kent, and he has some amazing stuff: landscape photography, nature photography. So here's a number of the pictures of Chimney Bluffs. Looks like somewhere out west or something, some badlands out west, except it's right here in the Great Lakes, central New York, Finger Lakes area. So there you can see the spires of the eroded Chimney Bluff going down to the lake shore, and then look at all that stuff down on the lake shore there. Big piles of ice. And we'll get a closer look at those in a second. And again, you can see in the extreme lower left, there's some guys down there, some folks down there that are, give you a sense of scale. So let's take a look at this again. Right down by the water, there's even a little ice bridge there as the waves splash in against the shore. And every time they splash in when it's below freezing, they leave a rime of ice, and it builds up these amazing ice formations. Every winter, it happens every winter, and all up and down the shore. You go to the parks like Fairhaven Beach, it's like that there as well. But he's got some amazing photographs of the waves splashing against the rough ice and creating some pretty amazing ice sculptures. Pretty cool, huh? So here's one I looked at this before I looked at his caption on it, and I said, wow, that looks like a desert. He says, yeah, and that's the caption he wrote, a desert of ice. So you can get quite a few yards out into the water. You can get these fields, these ice fields in a sense. And although the water, you can see the lake up there is not frozen over that. We did see in the other picture, let's see if we can get back to that. We did see that out in the lake itself, beyond the shore, there are some areas of covered with ice, and it looks like it's pretty broken up in the top of this picture here. So pretty amazing. I don't think people have seen that much ice, and actually there's more there now, I understand, on Lake Ontario in a very long time. So now we're going to go over to Sodus Point, which is directly north of, say, Seneca, Cayuga Lake there on the shore of Lake Ontario. And there's a lighthouse there, and Nigel got this picture. I don't think, that might not have been this winter, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's an amazing picture of waves splashing against that lighthouse at Sodus Point. So here it is, a closer picture of another wave splashing up against it. Look at that. And you can just about make out a lighthouse in there. And that would be, back in the old lighthouse days, I'm not sure it would have even been staffed during the wintertime, because there's no shipping on the lake in the winter. But not a place you'd want to be spending your afternoon or night or whatever. So that's pretty amazing. The Great Lakes largely have frozen over. In fact, some say that, I've heard meteorologists say, well, what kind of spring are we going to have? Speculation that the ice on the Great Lakes may actually make our spring a little bit cooler than we'd like to see, because the ice will have to melt and absorb a lot of heat just to melt the ice. Also, it will reflect a lot of sunlight. Ice and snow reflect sunlight, and it tends to keep things a little cooler. So there's a long stories you can talk about that, and global warming and so forth. So just a note about our frigid winter, that well, people say, well, it's so cold. What's this global warming thing? This must not really be global warming going on here. Global climate change is a better term, or climate crisis. Well, Alaska and Greenland and the upper latitudes have actually been warmer than normal. In fact, they've had some spring-like weather in this winter in Alaska. Temperatures going up in the 40s and 50s, and even set a record in January, I think, of 62 degrees. And while we were, frigid down here and below zero, the so-called polar vortex, which you've heard, which is not a new term, it's been around a long time, probably 50, 60 years or more they've been talking about that, is a circulation of frigid Arctic air, which is normally kept circulating in the polar area in the winter by the jet stream. But the jet stream has been disrupted a fair amount by climate change, by global warming and so forth. So the jet stream slops around and has allowed this polar air to slide down over Canada and the eastern United States from east of the Rockies. Not west of the Rockies, but east of the Rockies. And so we've gotten cold, and sometimes it's been colder like I say, in the United States proper, 48 states, than it has been in Alaska, or maybe even Greenland, I don't know. But other parts of the world have been extremely hot, like Australia and South America. So Sao Paulo, Brazil is running out of water because it's been so hot and dry. But let's go back to our region. We're going to look here now at Lake Ontario again. And then lower left, the white area is Lake Erie. And right between, you can see that line. That is the Niagara River. So that's the neck of land connecting New York with Ontario, and Niagara Falls and so forth. And let's take a look at Niagara Falls. There's another photographer, a guy named Steve Knapp of Cayuga View Photography, has graciously allowed me to share these photos with you that he went out. Let me see, what day was that? On the 7th, on March 7th, so about 5 days ago, last weekend, with a pilot named Harvey Greenberg of the Penyan Flying Club. They say, come fly with us. So you might want to look them up, the Penyan Flying Club, and Cayuga View Photography, if you're interested in that. But look at that. We're looking down on the Niagara River. Then you see the rainbow, and that's Horseshoe Falls there between Canada and the United States, Canada on the left. And pouring over there, and rainbow, and look at all that ice in there. We're going to see lots more. We're going to zoom in a little bit more there. Rainbow. Of course, there's a Rainbow Falls area. And then now, flying around over the Canadian side, looking back at the falls, and there's a lot of ice down there. Look down here again. All around the falls, away from it, especially the lower left and the lower center, are these huge piles of ice that build up from the water. So look again down here. And you can see the American Falls now all the way on the left there on the upper side of the Niagara River Gorge. And everything from just past Horseshoe Falls going to the left, almost everything is frozen over. You can see a couple of spots of open water that are probably kept open by the turbulence from the American Falls in the left center. Take another shot in there. Let's see, we'll go a little closer to the American Falls. Now, if you go there, if you've ever been there in the winter, you'll see these huge slabs of ice that have built up by the American Falls that are right next to the falls there, and that's really cool, as it were. So, so what does that tell us about our area, though? We've looked at the Great Lakes, Lake Ontario, talked a little bit about the Finger Lakes in general and freezing. So let's go back to our area, the Finger Lakes, again, Seneca and Cayuga, not frozen over, but this picture by another photographer. This is from our area, Bill Hecht, who likes to fly up in a plane and take pictures of our area a lot. This is not this year, it's another year, but it shows that northern end of Cayuga Lake, the last few miles of it that are frozen over because that portion of the lake is shallow and does not mix as much with the main volume of the lake farther south, which is quite deep. And so the water can cool off and freeze and not be continually mixing with slightly warmer water. Let's go on down to Taughannock Point. It's another Bill Heck picture, not from this winter, but it could have been. So Taughannock Point on the west side of Cayuga Lake, 10 miles north of Ithaca. You can make out perhaps the gorge going from the center of the picture all the way to the left, and the falls would be up in there, but we can't see them. We're not going to look at the falls right this minute, but we will hopefully have time to see it a little bit later. And notice that the lake was not frozen. This is the Taughannock Park Road going up the overlook, looking north on the lake. The lake is not frozen. Looking across the lake from the shoreline, it's not frozen. Looking back to Ithaca from Taughannock Point, not frozen. But down in Ithaca, it is frozen. This is East Shore Park, it's called. It's in the town of Ithaca, just next to the Cornell Sailing Center, across the street from the Lake Source Cooling Center. So right close to town. And the lake was frozen. I'm sure many people have noticed that the lake was frozen, but not many people have done this, which is to go out on ice fishing. Now, I have lived around here since the 60s for the most part, and I don't personally myself remember seeing people ice fishing out there before, though I've seen photographs of people doing it. The northern end of the lake has, virtually every winter has people ice fishing out there, and so that's very popular in the northern end of the lake. But the southern end of the lake, we don't get as much ice. It doesn't get as thick. It doesn't extend as far north, and it's probably not as safe. So, but this winter, there have been some ice fishing out there. So let's zoom in there. If you look in the lower right of the picture, you see that blue squiggly thing. That's an ice auger, and they dig a hole in the ice. And the gentleman in the center there is sitting. He's probably got a little pole, and he's sitting there with a pole over the and a line in the water, or perhaps he has what's called a tip-up, which shows when there's a fish on the hook. But they sit there and have a good time, and if it gets too windy, they go back in their little hut. So now we're going to take a look at some frozen waterfalls. We're going to take another aerial photographer. This one is Photography 4D. They have a Facebook page. You can probably find them online. I think I've used this picture before. This is looking at East Hill. Is Cornell up there in the sunlight there? They've used a little drone-like quadcopter, they call it, to get this picture. But right in the center, almost, just the right of center, is Ithaca Falls. We're going a little closer. Just the left of center here is Ithaca Falls. All frozen there. Look at Ithaca Falls. It is frozen. So we'll get a little closer here. And in fact, I have a short video to show you this amazing phenomenon. So we'll get that up here just a moment. Sub-zero weather turns 150 feet high Ithaca Falls into a glacial cliff. Fall Creek heads towards Cayuga Lake under a sheet of ice. Okay, so that's in Fall Creek, of course, and just upstream is in the Cornell campus is Beebe Lake, and at the upstream end of that, there's a little gorge feeding into Beebe Lake, and it's got a lot of ice jams in it. Of course, there have been ice jams all up and down Fall Creek and Cascadilla Creek. So I took this picture off the Cornell Plantations website. They manage Beebe Lake and the Fall Creek gorge and so forth. And it was basically a warning: don't go out on this ice jam, this broken up ice. It's very dangerous. So please don't do that. So stay off the ice, all right? All right, unless you're an ice fisherman. So, and you know what you're doing, I guess. I don't know. Don't listen to me. In any case, so let's look at some other waterfalls. Get a little bit of time here. We're going to go down to Buttermilk Falls, and we'll see. We'll zoom in on Buttermilk Falls. Look at that. You can hardly see any water flowing. And even if there were any, it would be on the lower left there, but I couldn't even see that. But we're going to take a look at it as it moves, or it tries to move, or at least the video will. Arctic air has stilled Buttermilk's froth and flow. Okay, and finally, at least as far as this series is concerned, we're going to go down to Robert Treman State Park and Lucifer Falls. That's the one most people don't realize you can see in the winter, but you go to the upper park, you take Route 327 from downtown, not downtown, but down the valley, off of Route is that 13 going south. Go up the hill to the upper park, and you can't walk into the gorge, but you can walk what's called the Rim Trail or South Rim Trail. And here, well, we'll just go look at it. Most park trails at Robert H. Treman State Park are closed during the winter, but the Rim Trail is open from the upper park to overlooks above Lucifer Falls. A sustained invasion of Arctic air in midwinter has turned 115 feet high Lucifer Falls nearly into a still life composition. But if you look closely, you can see that Enfield Creek still flows beneath the waterfall of ice. Wow, some amazing sights with waterfalls. They change so much. They change obviously during the year, but they also change week to week. in this time of year. So we'll take a look at that with Taughannock here in a minute. We got a couple of minutes left. Actually, though, this is 6 Mile Creek. I just stopped there briefly and took a look from the Giles Street Bridge over what's called the First Dam in the city of Ithaca. And there's an old mill there and falls next to that. And there's the other side of the gorge. The stream and the gorge take a bend to the left. So, if you go looking just to the left of this picture, the upper left, you can see some ice up there. You can see kind of a culvert. I think that comes out from under State Street, Route 79 East, Slaterville Road. And there's an intermittent waterfall there. Let's take a closer look. There's the culvert way up the upper center. You may not be able to see that on your set. But as water comes down through whatever little creek-like drainage there is in the neighborhoods on the other side of Bell Sherman or whatever it is, that area, they build up these enormous icicles. And this is very common anywhere where you have a small intermittent waterfall type situation in our gorges. You get these enormous ice formations in the wintertime. Some people like that climb. I'm ice climbers, but you don't want to do that when it's thawing and it's dangerous and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we're going to go look at Taughannock now. I don't have a well, I do have a video to show you, but it's not, I don't have enough time to show you, so maybe I'll show you next week and I'll have another one as well. So let's just pop down to Taughannock Falls. Taughannock Falls is sort of the king of all our waterfalls, or queen, or whatever. This was actually last weekend, and a group of prospective Cornell mechanical engineering graduate students were going around in a big touring coach for a familiarization of the area, hoping some of them might be interested in attending Cornell. And so they went to the overlook here. You get a good view of the falls from there. Now, look, you can't go down, you probably know this, you can't take this path, the steps, the normal steps going down to the overlook, because they get covered with ice and snow. And this is one of the most heavily visited places in the Finger Lakes region, is this overlook. So if you had countless people going up and down icy steps, you'd have somebody fall. And in fact, somebody on the stone steps leading up from the lower park from Route 89 up to the campground area. Years ago, when I used to work for the state parks in the wintertime, there was a young couple that were actually students at New York Chiropractic College up in Seneca Falls, and they went up there one evening after dark and tried to climb up those stairs, and the woman fell, injured herself. The guy picked her up and tried to bring her down. He fell, and she ended up dying from her injuries. So they take that very seriously, and the park police do not have a sense of humor about people going on the closed trails because of these kind of tragedies. So let's take a look at it. Well, just have a little bit more time. This is, oh yeah, this is one of the, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, I guess, 2-3 weeks ago. Look at the big ice dome that forms underneath Taughannock Falls from the overlook here. You can see there's a closer into the top of the falls. Oh my gosh. Here's another picture at another time. It changes a lot. You can see that it forms this sort of reverse volcano as the water freezes as it comes down under this ice dome. And most of the water goes out underneath the ice into the creek. But it's amazing. So here's a thaw that happened, I don't know, a week and a half ago. And it starts to cut open the ice dome, and you get some amazing images. So that's it. That's what we got to do today. So here's a sort of a parting image of early winter, December 9th, I think it was. Thank you all for joining me. Remember, oh yeah, that's the I will show this video next time, called First Snow at Taughannock Falls. But episode 68, March 12th, 2014. Go to walkinpark.com to see all my shows, or see this one again when we get it up online. So thanks for joining me.